Hello viewer, we're back in Kerbal Space Program again. The last video I did a orbital rendezvous. Initially my plan for the last video was going to be on a landing on the moon, actually on Minmus. However, it turns out that I can't make a ship complex enough to pull that off. So I did the orbital rendezvous instead. It turned out that doing that increased my finances a little bit, because there was a milestone for transferring Kerbals between craft and space, and there was also a contract that I had for an orbital rendezvous. So that has gotten my total cash balance up to 253,000. And the previous video to that, I unlocked some new stuff on the tech tree in preparation to doing that moonshot, but that video was never actually broadcast, so I'm going to show you what I actually added to it. First thing is I unlocked the basic science, which gave me access to batteries. That was 45 points. And then I unlocked electrics, which gave me access to solar panels, simple solar panels and larger batteries. And it also gave me access to a couple of probe cores. In addition to that, I unlocked general construction, which gave me other decouplers, and most importantly, it gave me access to the launch towers, which I don't particularly need at this particular point. But if I build a larger and more complex rocket, that's going to be a necessity. I also had to upgrade the research center to allow me for more than the 90 research tiers. And the final thing is that I had to upgrade the research center to allow my Kerbals to take surface samples when they're on, well, basically when they're out of the ship. There's not much point in going to one of the moons and landing on it if you can't take surface samples, because they're worth a decent amount of science. So other things that would be nice to unlock would be some of these ones here. Let's see, the T800 would be extremely handy to have. I could unlock that with 90 science points, which I don't have, but I think we're probably going to grab that as well. So let's go out of here. I'm also going to show you a mission that I took, which was for this Explore the Moon, and this is going to raise up a fair amount of cash. I did get an advance of 73,000, which is what got me up to this 253,000. And if I can get into orbit of the moon, do a spacewalk near the moon, and return to Kerbal, there's going to be a lot of extra cash for me. So I think that's going to be the purpose of this mission. There's also going to be a significant amount of science. So the last trip was a flyby of the moon, and I think this time we're going to go there. We're going to go into orbit. We're going to take some science. That should allow me to get enough science points to unlock at least one more of the fuel systems. And in order to build a little bit bigger rocket, I'm going to have to spend this 225,000. So that's going to somewhat deplete my resources. I might be able to get to Minmus with what I've got here, but I think I'm going to take the easy way out and do the moon orbit first. Okay, so first thing, we're going to open up our Minmus lander. Now this ship should do it. However, I'm going to go a little bit more complex because I no longer have any limitations on part numbers, and my delta V was not up to what I was hoping that it would be. I don't have to land, so I'm going to be able to pull the landing gear off of this. And I think I'm also going to put a little bit bigger fuel tank onto it. Not by very much though. And I believe I'm going to go 4-way symmetry on these, or 6-way symmetry if I can. Okay, it gets a little problematic to try to do this. I'm going to switch the symmetry down. And I'm going to mount just one of these things. Then I'm going to switch it back up again. And yes, I do realize that there's keyboard commands for that, and I wish I could remember what they were, but that's the sort of thing that comes to you when you play the game a lot, and I haven't really played it extensively in quite a while. Okay, what does that give me? 1500 on the lowest stage. Thrust to weights 1.25. Thrust to weights 105. I've got a high gain antenna. Okay, let's see what we can do with that. Actually, you know what? We'll call it Moon Orbiter. Alright, so SAS on, throttle up. It seems like a pretty good launch so far. Now I didn't want to start the gravity turn while I still had those solid boosters on, because there's too much chance with a rocket this tall of it taking out part of the rocket. So I'm trying to get this up above the atmosphere. I'm not really too worried about my my apoapsis, because that isn't going to be a problem. We're going to the moon, so it's going to be quite high. Alright, we are now in a stable orbit. Periapsis is up above 70 kilometers. I think we'll bump it up a little higher. Oh, apparently we're out of fuel on that stage. Alright, so we're good to go. We're in orbit. We've still got 2,800 meters a second of delta V. That should be plenty to get us to the moon and to get us into orbit and to get us back. So we'll set the moon as a target. Now we want to... Whoops, we set Minmus as a target. Now we want to line up the edge of the planet with the moon, and that's approximately where we're going to want to put our maneuver node. So we're going to have to do pretty much an entire orbit. And we're going to bring this out until we have about 825 meters of delta V. And that's basically just past knowledge that I know that it's going to be around that to get to the moon. Okay, so you can see that we now have an encounter, but we're 1.1, those are meters. We're 1,100 kilometers. So I should be able to do better. 865 kilometers. I'm going to pull that out a little higher. Now this red line here I believe is the second orbit around. So that's this would be my first encounter, and it'll come around, it'll do another orbit, and then this will be the second encounter. And in that case it would be 95 kilometers. In this case we're still 832 kilometers. I'm pretty sure I could do better than that. I guess I'm going to have to go a little higher still. $550. Back to 980. And I'm basically just trying to tweak this out until I get the closest possible encounter. $325. $125. That's getting a little bit better. And that's actually probably slamming straight into it. $90 kilometers, and I believe we're getting onto a free return trajectory, which is where it sort of does a figure 8 around the back of it. This was the same sort of thing NASA used to do with their moon launches. But 95 is actually pretty good. I can maybe get it slightly better, but I think I'm just going to go with that. So I've got 29 minutes until I got to do that burn. And the other thing is that it's often a lot easier to get close and then to make minor adjustments once you're partway along. Because that way, like 1 or 2 meters a second is not going to have such an extreme effect on your trajectory. So what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in and we're going to warp to here, which is just going to be a little bit before the maneuver node. Whoa, 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 what the hell just happened there? Oh, I'm looking at the wrong capsule. Yeah, okay, this is our capsule. It's this other one I'm watching going around. I'm thinking, did it miss it? Did it skip it? What the hell is it doing? So I've got 2 minutes to get ready for this burn. So what I want to do is I want to get lined up on this maneuver. And I can fast forward. And actually, before I do this, I should make sure that I'm set for 100% power on the engine. Right, I don't have the thrust limiter turning things down. And I meant to look up what the keyboard command was for full throttle and zero throttle, because those are much better to use for maneuver nodes like this. But I forgot to, and I'm not dropping back out of the game now to check it. Oh, and because Jeb has leveled up a little bit, you can actually lock on to holding at prograde and retrograde. So that's kind of a handy skill. And you can see that where we're burning, it's actually adjusting on the opposite side of the gravity well to pull the orbit out. That's one of the things that takes a little bit of getting used to with Kerbal Space Program and orbital mechanics in general. Okay. I think we're probably good for that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase the maneuver node, which will show our actual trajectory. And our PE is going to be 30 kilometers, which is pretty low, but I would say that that is definitely a win. So at this point, we can warp to here. I don't think I'm going to need to do any adjustments to this orbit. So we're just going to straight on go with what we got. The line here is communication with Kerbal. And I didn't want to try to do a warp across the transition zone here. So what I'm going to want to do is at here, I'm going to want to add another maneuver, and I'm going to go retrograde. No, you know what? I'm going to wait until I've actually done the transition. I don't want to confuse the issue any more than I have to here. So I'm manually warping past the encounter transition. Okay, so at this point we're in the moon's area of influence. So we're going to pull into an orbit here, so I'm going to add maneuver. And we're going to drop this down. And I want to make the AP about 50 kilometers because that's going to put us into a close orbit. I don't really like that. That looks like it's going to put me inside the inside the moon. AP at 61. All right, I think we're going to go with that, and I might make a bit of an adjustment to the PE once we get a little bit closer in. Okay, so at this point we have another hour until we have to do our burn to enter orbit. So it's time to do some science, and this was the reason that we brought along batteries and solar panels. We have 350 electric charge, that's fully charged up. So this gives us an opportunity to do the goo thing here. Observe mystery goo. We can get a little bit of science from that. We can do a crew report. And we get a 100% transmit bonus. So this time we're going to transmit this back. So this will give us an extra 10 science. And if I open up the resource panel here, you can see that that's drawn down a fair amount of my electric power. So that took about 50 to transmit, which is all that I have in the ship. And if it wasn't for the solar panels on it, I would now be out of power and I wouldn't be able to use the reaction wheels. And what that does, it gives me a crew report high over the moon, and then I can do other crew reports over the various biomes on the moon, or at the moon. And we also have our thermometer, which we can probably get, nope, nothing to be had from that. Barometric pressure is probably the same thing. Nothing to be had from that. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is, I guess a crew report was, oh, maybe an EVA report. Nope, nothing there. So our next stop is low orbit of the moon. So for that, we go to the map screen. We'll click here, warp to this location. And we want to face retrograde. And retrograde is actually going to line up with this maneuver node once we get to it in another 6 minutes. So we'll fast forward our time a little bit. And it's the nav ball, you can see it's slipping off retrograde because we're in time acceleration. As soon as I come back out of that, it'll snap back to the retrograde marker. And you can see that the node is starting to come pretty close to lining up. And you don't want to get much below about 20 kilometers on this, because I think there's mountains that come up to about 10. And it would be pretty annoying to get here and actually crash into the side of a mountain. So it's taken us 277 to break orbit, and about so we're going to get there at about 1800. Sorry, about 17. Alright, that's pretty close. I'm going to wait until we get to PE so I don't drop that any. We're going to call this finished. 28 kilometers there. Now I get a couple of messages that I've completed one of my contract parameters, which was go into orbit around the moon, so that gives me 76,000 and 4 science points. And I also get a world's first milestone, probably for orbiting the moon. And we're still locked on retrograde because we're going to drop our AP down a little bit more before we start doing some other reports. Now, if you can get your orbit going directly over these craters, there is different biomes. The crater's one of them. There's another crater over here that's a second one. So sometimes that might be worth doing as well. Okay, so that puts me below 50 kilometers. So if I burn another 67 meters per second on this node, then I should be able to be into that orbit. And I'm going more towards what they refer to as the radial, the normal, which is the up and down direction as well as a little bit of retrograde. And that changes my orbital inclination because I actually came at this thing not quite straight on the orbital plane, which is what this white line is. So my orbit's a little bit screwy from there. But I do want to try to get over top of this crater because it is a biome and it'll give me a separate separate EVA report. And we're going to call that close enough. Okay, so now we're in a stable orbit above the moon, less than 50 kilometers on both sides, which means we're probably done in the map screen here, and the rest of it is all science that we're going to have to take care of. Why is that looking so fuzzy? Yeah, that texture is not loading in the way it ought to. So we're good with that. We go back inside and transmit that. Oh, I don't have line of sight with the planet, so I can't transmit it. Yeah, I don't know why the texture's so blurry. It does not normally look like that. That's what it should look like. It's like the level of detail has gone screwy or something. Now I did have a mod called Parallax, which apparently it's sort of outdated, but I was under the impression it simply wouldn't work as opposed to screwing with the graphics. I guess I'll have to take that out. Midland craters. And I think you have to go back inside to dump your data. And I don't believe I did any of this stuff last time because when I was doing the flyby, I was a little pressed for time. Anyways, I'll go out and I'll collect that science. And now that I'm coming back on line of sight with Kerbal, I'll be able to transmit some of this data back. But some of the data, like for instance the pressure and the temperature, is not worth full value. So you want to keep that in the capsule and take it all the way back with you. Okay, do we have another biome yet? That's peculiar. And particularly when it's dark, it can be kind of hard to tell sometimes what these biomes are. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just go out and I'll keep spamming the EVA report. Now, what I have to be a little leery of is when I go into the shadow of the moon, the solar panels are not going to be picking up any extra power. And my contract parameter was gather science, so that's a nice payoff. Spacewalk. Oh, okay. So much for electricity. Okay, so I can transmit this because I still have enough electricity to send it back. But I won't be recovering any more electricity until I get back into the sunlight. Now, what did that buy me for science? I got 156, which will unlock at least one more section on the in the tech tree. And I'll have to remove that parallax mod and find out whether or not that's the issue with the graphics on this. And I think the final one we're going to do is on that crater. Let's see if we can get one here. A lot of midlands here. And it might be possible to adjust my trajectory here to get over this crater. But that's also sort of where I want to be doing my exit from the back to Kerbal. Yeah, I think I'm going to set up and do that. Maneuver. .92, I still got 16, so that's plenty to get back. So it's going to burn 92 meters a second, 1635, and all I need to do is get pointed back at Kerbal and get myself back into the atmosphere. So I have plenty of delta V for that. Yeah, that looks horrific. And I think right about here is where we're going to do our exit back to Kerbal. And all we need is enough to do our transition for an escape. Basically anything beyond that is really unnecessary. That puts me in a somewhat lower PE. So I'm going to do my final EVA just over this thing, and then I'm going to go back in and set my escape back to Kerbal. Alright, east far side crater. Board the craft. Go to prograde. And in 40 seconds we're out of here. Yeah, it's like the thing's actually untextured. That's got to be the parallax mod. In fact, while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to do a save so that I can come back and check it here. And make sure I got the problem fixed next time I run the game. Because if the moon is doing it, Minmus is also going to be doing it. And since it's butt ugly, we'll do it from the map screen. Now, a lot of times I probably should have burned a little bit earlier, because what I want to do is ideally you want to try to get your trajectory retrograde for the moon, which will cause you to drop closer to Kerbal. I still have a relatively high PE, so as soon as I get, as soon as I cross here, I'm going to go onto this path and I'm going to be heading this way. So I'm going to want to do retrograde burn again to pull this PE down to put me inside the atmosphere and get ready for my aero braking. Okay, so that puts my PE fairly low. 275 kilometers. Okay, I probably won't even have to touch it again after that. So now we just have to transition out of the moon sphere of influence. And then we're going to do an EVA to collect up all of the data from the various instruments. And you can see this red line here says that I do not have line of sight with, oh, I do have line of sight with Kerbal, but it's weak. And it can be a little confusing that these points here, like you see as I hover over this, it shows the marker on the path. It can be a little confusing that they don't sort of line up correctly if you're not used to this, the way that it works on its sphere of influence. Alright, so now I'm dropping down to Kerbal. The moon is history. And it looks like it's got its texture back because I'm no longer in its SOI. So, what can I do from here? Crew reports. Yes, high in space. So we'll transmit that. I'm good for electric charge. And we're going to go out and collect this. And what about the one on the other side? Yeah, there's a little bit there. So I'm going to collect that too. I don't think I'm really going to have any improvement over grabbing a fresh sample. Okay, time to do some EVA again. Now, when I did my last flyby of the moon, I'd forgotten that they added to the game this thrust limiter for your jetpack, and it's always a good idea to use that because at 100% it's extremely hard to control this thing. But when you turn it down to about 20%, it's much easier. Once you're free of the craft, it's R to activate your RCS thrusters. And then the space bar will align it to the camera. And then it's WASD. And control and space are up and down. And you see how you can make small control movements, and you can actually get very precise control over it. Whereas the last time I tried to EVA to do this stuff, I was whipping around all over the place. Now, I don't know if I can store two of those goo canister data, so I'm going to go back into the capsule so make sure it drops them both off. Okay, and you can see that it's removed those that data, and now I can go back and I can collect the other two. And of course it puts it back up at maximum again. Alright, so we can turn our SAS back on. We have a bunch of data. We still have plenty of fuel. And we have a ton of time until we get back to Kerbal. Now, what I can do is I can go retrograde and I can drop my PE maybe even a little more. And it's basically it's here that I can use it as well. The red line is a mod called trajectory, and that's when you're actually in the atmosphere. And the white line here is your trajectory after you're taking into the consideration the atmosphere. And it's usually a much more accurate than the game itself. Like the game thinks I'm going to drop into the atmosphere and then orbit back out to 16,000 kilometers. But in reality, this is about as far as I'm coming back out. Now, I'm going to lighten the ship considerably once I get down there, which means that I don't think I'm even going to get this far out of the atmosphere. I think I'm probably just going to do a full-on re-entry. So at this point, we can warp down to about here. Now, there's not really a good reason to still have the lower stage involved. I can pretty much cut that thing loose at this point, even though there's a bunch of fuel on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick it off of my path because I don't want it slamming into me. And just in case this goes sideways, it's always a good idea to do a save, just in case. Okay, so we're going to jettison that stage. We're going to go retrograde. And that's it, we're landing. Now I've actually got a heat shield on this thing, but I've tweaked down the ablator to only 100 units, and that's a little bit safer than using the one built into the capsule. It also adds a little bit of extra mass, which makes the ship a little bit more stable. And you can see it's starting to warm up. Because the kind of velocity we're burning off here, you can see we're burning through the ablator reasonably quickly. But it does keep the craft itself a lot cooler. And we're suborbital. And that's about half the ablator gone right there. And if we get super lucky, we'll actually land on the ground and we'll pull a surface sample. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to end up going down in the water. What I probably should have done was set the periapsis a little bit higher, maybe at 45 kilometers instead of where I did. And that would have taken us a little bit further around to the light side of the planet. But we did pick up a decent amount of science on this mission. 187, so we can actually unlock 2 items in the tech tree, or 2 nodes rather. And it looks like we probably could have gone by with only about 75 on the heat shield instead of 100. And still had a bit of a safety margin. At this point we're slow enough to deploy the shield, the chute. And we're going to set this for full deployment at 750. That'll give it enough time to slow the craft to a safe speed, but not have a stupid amount of time drifting down from down to the ocean. We'll save that crew report. Every little bit of science helps. And apparently I didn't have one over the water. And we're down. We'll do recovery. Wow, 340. So I guess I can unlock a number of things on here. That should make the landing fairly simple. And we have 421,000 even after upgrading the assembly building. So that will make it possible to unlock the parts necessary. Looks like Jeb got some XP for that. And I'm not going to do these just yet, but probably the next things that I would tend to do would be the fuel systems to get larger fuel tanks, and possibly even heavy rockets. That gives me heavy engines, but it doesn't give me large fuel tanks. So I got to figure out exactly where they are. But these are 90 each, and by the looks of it, I can unlock 3 of these, or possibly 1 of those and 1 of these ones. Yeah, this gets into the larger boosters and such like that. But that'll be for another video. Anyways, that was doing an orbit of the moon. You can see that even going back there and orbiting and trying to take EVA reports over top of a couple of the different biomes and some science experiments and stuff like that while in orbit was worth doing. And that should also have unlocked a mission to do a moon landing if I come into here. plant a flag on the moon, and that gives me an advance of 60,000. And then explore the moon is land on it, plant a flag, and return to Kerbal. Now, the only problem is I would like to take both of these missions because they'll sort of overlap, and they're both going to give me advances. However, I've got 6 missions active, so I can't really accept another one unless I was to cancel one of the ones that I've got or to complete one of these. Now, test this one at the launch site would be a pretty simple one, so I'll probably do that, and that will open up another slot, and then I can take the extra mission there. But like I say, that's going to be another video, and even once I take that and I agree that they can pay me to go to the moon, I'm still going to Minmus first because that's a much easier landing spot, and like any government agency, I'm going to take funds and then I'm going to do something completely different with them. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you learned a thing or two about Kerbal Space Program. Just a little bit under a month before Kerbal Space Program 2 goes into early access, so that should be pretty exciting, and of course there'll be a couple of videos on that on the channel, no doubt. Looking forward to it, and hopefully it's not a disappointment. Hopefully it doesn't get delayed again, but I guess we'll find out on February 24th. Anyways, thanks for watching. Come back for the next one.